Hello there, welcome to my review of the Rockford Files, Season 4, Episode 9, The Mayor's Committee from Deer Lick Falls. Written by Bill Stratton and directed by Ivan Dixon. The episode begins, rather bizarrely, with Jim driving a fire truck of besuited men around the streets of LA. They are a committee of town leaders from Deer Lick Falls, buying the engine, and he was acting as their broker. We also get a hint at the type of folk they are.
How do you trust anyone in the state where half the people hide their eyes behind sunglasses?
How about these massage parlors? You know, hot ones, Jim?
And eventually, the head of the committee asks Jim to track down his missing niece, Lauren Ingeborg.
That's Ingeborg.
While Jim goes about looking for Lauren, the committee reveal more about their characters and that they're up to something.
It was easy in the heat of the moment to talk about doing this.
Rockford is qualified.
Yes, and the money will certainly interest him.
Jim takes what he's found to the committee, who are now entertaining some young ladies in their hotel room, and is made an offer by the head of the committee, Everett Alton Benson.
After Lauren's accident, and it has to look like an accident.
Naturally, Jim is appalled by the suggestion and threatens them with the cops, as they threaten him with their friends in high places. Jim alerts Dennis, but with no evidence, they manage to avoid any further heat. This is a heck of an unexpected opening that quickly shifts from the sublime to the ridiculous, all while seeming pretty plausible. I really like how from the start these committee men are shown to be inherently goofy, riding on the fire truck like giddy schoolboys who've won a competition. And as we learn more about them, we get to see their different characters revealed. Benson, as the leader, is the least small town of them, although only by a hair, so when he asks Jim about getting a massage, we and Jim know the implication. The same implication made about the ladies they found to party with them in their room.
Jim, how about those ladies? Now, that one there actually works in a massage parlor.
He was under the mistaken belief that private eyes are also, or at least adjacent to, hitmen, and that for a price, Jim will happily commit murder. After all, he's from LA. The others going along with this idiotic scheme are Newt Jacobs, who wants to sightsee.
Look at this! My feet are the same size as Bubbles.
Noah Detweiler, who seems to back the plan, but gets sicker each time we see him due to his heart complaint.
Mr. Dietweiler isn't feeling well. He has a heart condition.
And Arthur Kelso, who from the very beginning starts to have second thoughts.
This is insanity. This is wrong.
Managing to convey all this within the first 10 minutes, as well as what their scheme is quite the writing feat. And it's not done through extraneous or unnecessary exposition. It's done with a few well-placed lines, situations, and some subtext, and is never over or underdone, so you know exactly what's going on. Dennis reasons that now they know the cops are involved, they will back away from the hit, but warns Jim he might now be a target. What Jim doesn't suspect is that they will use their political connections to get Jim's license revoked.
Are you interested in hearing my account of the events?
Nope.
Meanwhile, Dennis runs background checks on the committee, and they all come out not just clean, but high-ranking members of respectable society, so they couldn't possibly have done anything wrong. Which means Jim has no option but to track down Lauren and find out what this mess is all about. Having not got the hint at all that they will be prime suspects if anything happens to Lauren, the committee has found a new assassin. But luckily Jim has tracked down Lauren, played by Priscilla Barnes. And if I can get a Three's Company pun in at some point, I will. Lauren seems to be unfazed by the news that her uncle wants her dead, and says she'll sort it out herself. Which she tries to do by answering the ad her uncle had placed in the papers. He sells her the story that Jim is a nut, and convinces her to meet him for dinner. While Kelso, and now Detweiler both have second thoughts.
Have you any idea what it's like to actually kill a human being?
I'm not sure I'm up to actually...
Benson, however, wants to finish the job himself now, and sets Lauren up to get run over by the others. But Jim has been watching the whole situation unfold and intercept her, taking her straight to Dennis, where she explains the committee has been hiding their taxable earnings from the IRS and decided to kill Lauren because she knew about it. Unfortunately, Chapman, in his infinite wisdom, refuses to pursue the case for lack of evidence, so Jim has to take care of things his own way by going directly to the IRS. Having failed in their last effort, Detweiler is deteriorating fast, and Kelso now feels that he has no choice but to kill Lauren himself, and quickly. But she and Jim are having just as much trouble with the IRS as they did with the cops.
It shouldn't be more than a few weeks till we verify it.
But while this second act borders on farce, it never quite tips over into silliness, and it's made all the more believable knowing the type of person that Chapman is, and the type of organisation the IRS is. We're also shown that while the committee are clueless buffoons, they're also scared and backed into a corner, which is why they're acting so impulsively. I do think the references to them being World War II veterans to justify the level of violence they're willing to commit to be a little too much, as it was enough to watch them unravel over the course of the episode to understand why their motivation is so extreme. As the IRS investigation is going to be a long one, Jim decides to get Lauren to hiding, but the committee has already tracked them down and have cut Jim's brakes. Thankfully, Jim's been in situations like this before and manages to stop the car, thanks to a picket fence and a shrubbery. And, thanks to Rocky, Jim gets an idea.
For all they know, they did kill her.
Jim gets Angel to convince the committee that Lauren is dead, but was on her own in her own car, before he then calls them and convinces them he's got blackmail material on them and he's willing to use it.
I gotta play it greedy, Dad. I'm the only thing standing between them and the slammer.
This again is some excellent writing, using their low opinion of Jim against them in order to set them up, all as their world crumbles through a series of terrible decisions that snowballed from their first fairly minor crime into this monster of their own creation. Something Rocky sums up neatly earlier in the episode.
What kind of an uncle would want to see his niece killed in a wreck like you almost had?
Having no alternative now but to kill Jim, the committee go to the prearranged meeting place and we get a delightful look inside a 1970s mall. All varnished wood, concrete and brown tiles. Despite it looking like Kelso might actually take somebody out with his automatic weapon, the cops are on the scene and arrest the committee. I really enjoyed this episode, which is a classic Rockford caper, roping him into a much bigger case than he ever intended and quickly spiralling out of control. It gets very close to being too unbelievable, but manages to never stray that far, as it takes pains to establish the characters and their motivations, and is all the more realistic for it. With the exception of the hippie guitar player in the mall, no one seems out of place or cartoonish. Everything that happens is not just believable, but presented as believable, from the committee's dalliances with women who are not their wives, to them approaching Rockford under the misapprehension that he'd be willing to kill somebody, to them eventually taking responsibility to do the deed. The dialogue, performances, and scenes are all presented as sensible and reasonable actions from the perspective of these characters. For example, when they try to run Lauren over, her uncle just leaves her standing there confused, and that's a far more believable way for this panicky idiot to act than if he'd been more calculating and tried to trip her. It was also smart not to show Kelso in the mall, having shown us his preparation for the shooting. Rather than for us to see him walking around with a machine gun covered in wrapping paper, which might have looked too silly, the episode neatly avoids that, and does so at every other moment which might verge into silliness, with the exception of the aforementioned hippie guitar player.
And don't let them shove you around!
That character and the performance seems a little too clownish and overwritten in an episode that avoids that everywhere else, and I could have done without him, especially as the episode has a great epilogue where all the characters act true to form and we get a great punchline to end the episode. Despite the troubadour, this episode is still a 5 out of 5 for me. Thank you. Goodbye.